how I got into it, and you know, most people by now know my niche. They've seen me on your show or they've seen me with Human Proof Designs, and they've went and looked me up and figured out what I was doing. So I'm not worried about people snooping. It started off back 5, 6 years ago, actually, when I was looking to figure out how to live stream my church services for my church, and there was not hardly any information out there. And I thought this niche of church technology would be a great niche for an Amazon niche site. And so I started putting together a niche site and that's when I ran across you because you were giving a lot of information about both keyword research, the KGR method, and just how to do Amazon. And so I built up my original site or my affiliate site. And in fact, right before March, I was up to making almost 5,000 a month off of that affiliate site. Then March came, and Amazon decided to give us all a bad haircut. And at that point, I went, okay, I can see the future of this. And I thought to myself, well, why can't I sell this product instead of sending people to Amazon? Why can't I send people to my own site? And so I contacted a couple people I knew that were in the industry, a couple CEOs, and said, "What would it take for me to sell your product?" And they got me in contact with some distributors, and so I built another site, a sister site that was just e-commerce for drop shipping, and that's what I've been doing.
Got it. Okay. This is pretty amazing because a lot of people were hit pretty hard in March, April of 2020. I've heard 35% cut in revenue up to 50 to 60% depending on what category area. So yeah, it was definitely a big deal. And it's interesting that you mentioned a lot of people, found your site because you were public and you were very generous in sharing some of your stories and you weren't too secretive, which, that happens. So I'm just curious, did you run into, copycats or people that were trying to, just reverse engineer?
Not reverse engineer. I think some people may have tried, but unless I'm a pastor, unless you can speak with the voice of the niche, most people are going to pick up your you really don't know what you're talking about, or you're really not part of the niche. So there's a little bit of understanding and lingo of how the inner workings of church works that average Joe Blow just isn't going to understand.
Yep.
So I'm not worried about it. It's not that we're trying to be secretive. It's just there's a, if you were a plumber and you're a real plumber, you can tell when a plumber's talking and when somebody who just went to Wikipedia to find out something is talking.
Yeah, and to get another quick example on a tangent, I had to blow out my sprinklers recently because it's going to get cold and you have to
Right.
make sure you don't have water in there or it'll freeze and break. So I was looking up information on like compressors and blowing out sprinkler systems, and yeah, I saw a bunch of affiliate sites which essentially had garbage content. I was like, I could tell they don't know what they're talking about at all with compressors.
Yeah.
And if you read 15 minutes or go down to the hardware store or go down to Ace and talk to people that know what they're talking about, you realize that the vocabulary doesn't match up. They have no clue what you're using a compressor for. So that makes
Right.
sense. All right.
Yeah. So I really didn't experience any loss or anybody trying to steal my niche. It's just, or if they did, they never ranked, so I never saw them.
Very well. That's good. I mean, that's what should happen. All right. So let's
Yeah.
let's rewind just a bit, just to the the original site, and you mentioned some keyword research. So can you just give us like a quick overview? Were you going after just a bunch of keywords? Did you kind of narrow it down to just low competition and then build up from there? What was the overall approach?
Well, at first, I before I ran into you and what you taught, I just went with, your typical keyword research of, okay, it has so many searches, let's go after that, not knowing whether, not really doing enough background to whether it's high competition, low competition, or whatever. Scored a few successes that way, but then uh, when I learned the KGR method, uh, that's what, excuse me, that's when it took off. And so one year I published over 500 articles on the site. Um, all of them were KGR. And they were either reviews, uh, for instance, a Canon HF R800 camcorder review. Uh, and so they were product name review or best X for Y within the in the niche. And so, uh, I saw a video recently of a priest that was using a squirt gun to baptize kids, and because of COVID, and so a squirt gun for baptizing kids, in church, that type of thing.
Okay, gotcha. And were you writing most of the content, or did you outsource some of it?
I wrote the first 100 articles, and then I outsourced to Textun, TXTUN.com, and they did a good job.
Okay,
So, and for most of them, best X for Y or a product review, I can throw in a few little pieces here or there that makes it relevant to my niche, and it's fine.
got it. Okay. And you mentioned you wrote the first 100, which is quite a bit. And if I remember right, you have a writing background. And did you work for a newspaper at some point? Is that right?
I have written for newspapers, from my job as a pastor, I'll do a weekly column in the local newspaper. And I also had a blog that had over 500 articles that I'd written just on Christianity and my perspectives and on different topics.
Very
So,
cool. Okay, cool. So you're not afraid of getting behind the keyboard and writing. And I actually, this is kind of interesting. A lot, my audience is pretty diverse from all over the world. And I will tell you, you're an older demographic. I could tell. I don't know how old you are,
yep,
but you look older than me.
57.
All right.
Hoorah.
It's a young 57, but I was going to say, you are getting into some technical areas, you're building multiple websites. We're actually going to talk about some of the tech stack that you're using now and some of the selections that you made, but did you always have a knack, or are you particularly stubborn and able to work through the issues, or why are you able to do this?
Both. uh, I have always been a computer geek. I owned the first was it Commodore? It was the first Commodore computer that came out on the open market, the Commodore 64. In fact, this one didn't even have a real keyboard. It had a touchpad keyboard. It was that old.
Wow.
You had little press down little buttons like you would on a phone, actually.
Okay.
And so it wasn't a regular keyboard. So I have always been a computer geek. And so I all the way up. And when the internet started, I was right there when it first started and everything else. But I never actually did anything other than play games and do word processing and that kind of stuff. I was never on the web, building things on the web. It wasn't until 2011 that I actually built my first website. It was an ugly blog on Blogspot. Trying to think of what blogger. It was an ugly blogger blog. And that got me started, but it didn't last long. And then I switched over to WordPress, and then I've been WordPress ever since until I did this e-commerce. Then I had to learn another new one.